On the morning of August 3rd, at the Palisadoes International Airport, the moment approaches for the arrival of Her Royal Highness Princess Margaret. From the airport, the Princess drives through the gaily decorated streets of Kingston, where thousands of spectators line the route to witness the first major event of the 8 days of celebrations.
Present!
2 minutes to midnight, Sunday, August the 5th, the birth of Jamaican independence.
What rights do we have as Jamaicans? What determines these rights? What provides a framework for these rights? Like when we vote our head of state, how long our Prime Minister can serve. The answers to all these questions are found in the Constitution, which is the foundation of all laws. Many youth have never read the Constitution and see it as something which does not affect their lives. But why is the Constitution important to youth and all Jamaicans? What should we know about the Constitution?
It's the fundamental law of our land on which all other laws are based. All the other statutes are informed by the Constitution. Also, what makes it more important is that it informs us of all our rights and freedoms.
The Constitution is not static, and it has been amended several times over the years. It was drafted by a bipartisan committee. The initial draft was developed for Jamaica's independence from Britain in 1962 by a 17-member committee of Parliament consisting of 16 men and 1 woman, including 2 national heroes, Norman Manley and Sir Alexander Bustamante, who were the leaders of their respective political parties at the time, and MPs Sir Donald Sangster and Edward Seaga, who later became Prime Ministers of Jamaica. The lone female was Iris King, who served as the first female mayor of Kingston.
The Constitution is the legal foundation of a society. It is what sets the legal parameters from which all other laws are developed.
The Constitution is the source of laws in the country. It is the grand law, and it is a law from which all other laws derive legitimacy.
As powerful as the Prime Minister might be, as powerful as the Cabinet might be, as powerful as Parliament might be, they can't do anything or pass any law that the Constitution does not allow. The Constitution is what sets out our fundamental rights. Those are rights that nobody can take away from us. No parliament, no government. Those are laid down by the Constitution, and therefore, if you don't have a Constitution that is strong and that is enforceable, then we wouldn't have any protection.
Some more facts to note are, it was developed over 4 months. The public was given only 4 weeks to make contributions to the development of the Constitution, and only 1 of the 12 sittings of the Joint Independence Constitution Committee heard these submissions. It has 10 chapters. 1. Interpretation and effect. 2. Citizenship. 3. Fundamental rights and freedoms. 4. The Governor General. 5. Parliament. 6. Executive powers. 7. The Judicature. 8. Finance. 9. The Public Service. 10. Miscellaneous.
The Constitution that we have, which was developed by the British 55 years ago, is not appropriate for today's Jamaica. As a matter of fact, in some respects, while I know it has served us well, in some respects, I believe it has held us back. And like everything else, after 55 years of experience, we are able to determine what it is in the Constitution that needs to be changed. How do we strengthen provisions that are there that need strengthening? How do we remove provisions there that we feel may be holding us back? And that is what constitutional reform is all about.
It's not perfect, I would say there's no perfect constitution in the world. I wouldn't focus on the time it took to develop it. What emerged from it, the product of that process, had consensus within the society at that time, the early 1960s, and was a coherent document, elegantly written, and I think was a good document for the era that it was created in. That's over 50 years ago, and in the course of independence, things have changed. Many things have changed, not just in Jamaica but across the world. The expectations of the average citizen, their access to information and knowledge, and what they expect of persons who put themselves forward to represent them. All of these things have evolved significantly. So some of the impetus, some of the demand for constitutional reform has been driven by the way in which society has evolved and changed over time. But I actually think the 1962 Constitution of Jamaica was a good document for the era in which it was created, and has largely served us well. We've never had a coup in Jamaica. Our democratic system of government has managed to survive difficult times where the society has been under tremendous stress. There are not many countries that can say that in the world. So Jamaica's constitution is a robust document and has stood the test of time.
Different parts of the Constitution have different levels of what is known as entrenchment, which refers to the ease of which it can be changed. There is ordinary, which requires just a simple majority in both the Senate and Parliament. Entrenched, a 2/3 majority is needed in both the Senate and Parliament. And deeply entrenched, a 2/3 majority vote is needed in both houses, as well as a referendum.
One of the weaknesses in it is the difficulty of changing it. The founding fathers created a provision, Section 49 of the Constitution, which is the rule in it that governs how you amend anything within it. While many of the provisions can be changed relatively easily by a simple majority of parliamentarians in both houses, there are some which are what are called entrenched provisions. And in our Constitution, there are two levels of entrenchment. There is what we loosely refer to as ordinary entrenchment. And an ordinarily entrenched provision is one that requires a 2/3 majority of both houses. And remember, in our Constitution, it is written so that the governing party does not have 2/3 in the Senate, the upper chamber. They have one less than 2/3, so they cannot amend an ordinarily entrenched provision without the opposition senators being in support, at least one. An example of a provision that is enshrined in that way would be the provision that the Privy Council has said would have to be introduced if the Caribbean Court of Justice is to replace it as our final court of appeal. Interestingly, the Privy Council itself is not entrenched in the Constitution. You can remove the Privy Council by ordinary, simple majority, in other words, one more than half of both houses. So any government can remove the Privy Council, but what the Privy Council said in a case where this matter went before them for adjudication, what they said was that to replace the Privy Council, whatever you replace it with, must be ordinarily entrenched in the Constitution. In other words, must be in a provision that cannot be changed other than by a 2/3 majority of both houses.
But there is a third category of provisions in the Constitution that are called deeply entrenched. Those now, like for example, the Queen, removing the Queen, like the fundamental rights section, like certain other provisions relating to the justice system and your entitlement to a fair trial and so on. Those are deeply entrenched provisions. And not even the government and the opposition, if all of them agree, can change those. Only the people themselves can change those. And what would have to be done is that you would have to put the matter to the people in what would be conducted like an election, where people leave their homes and they go to polling stations and they vote whether they are in favor of that change or not. So it is three different categories and three levels of approval that the Constitution would require for changes. But in all of them, no matter how simple the provision is, even if it's something that government by itself can do, consultation with the people is absolutely important.
Although both parties have committed themselves to making Jamaica a republic within the Commonwealth, which would mean removing the Queen as our head of state and having a Jamaican as our president, as our head of state, but nobody has actually attempted to do that yet.
The most recently to be debated and amended section of the Constitution is Chapter 3, Charter of Fundamental Right, where 6 new rights were added in 2011. 1. The right to vote and participate in free and fair elections. 2. The right to a healthy and productive environment. 3. The right of every child to the protection required by the status of a minor. 4. The right of every child to free education from infant through primary level. 5. The right to fair, humane, and equal treatment from public authorities. 6. The right of every citizen to be granted a passport and not to be denied or deprived thereof, except by due process of law. In total, there are 19 rights and freedoms. However, how well does the Constitution represent and protect the people? Others may question its relevance, while others may question how well has the Constitution worked for the country.
So it tells us that we have the right to primary and pre-primary education, that we have the right to freedom of assembly, we have the right to believe in what religion we want to believe in. It gives us the right to express ourselves freely in what manner we choose. And I think it's important for youth to know about these things, to know their rights and be empowered. Remember, the Constitution was designed to protect you. It was designed to allow us to express ourselves as youths.
So the Constitution is the fundamental law of the country, and it has a very important chapter in it, which is we call the Charter of Rights. 2011 replaced a prior charter or a prior set of similar rules that had been part of the Constitution from independence, but were considered to be old-fashioned and inadequate. And in 2011, we managed to, by consensus, amend the Constitution to import into it a totally new Charter of Rights, which basically guarantees basic human rights to all Jamaicans. So, for example, we have a guarantee of primary education in our Constitution, which was not in the original Constitution, but was introduced in 2011, pre-primary and primary. And that is not found in the UN Declaration or in the European Convention or any. So that's an example. And there are some provisions on the other side, which, when I say the other side, which limit rights, which are unique to Jamaica. So, for example, the Constitution, the Charter, the 2011 Charter, has a provision in it that says that any existing law relating to unborn children or sexual offences is deemed to be constitutional, essentially, meaning can't be challenged as being unconstitutional. And that was put in place to ensure, for example, that Jamaica's law related to abortion and related to buggery would not be amenable to a constitutional challenge. Though that is a somewhat unusual provision to find in a constitution with a Charter of Rights. So there are some uniquely Jamaican features to our charter, though broadly it is based on international norms of human rights.
What is constitutional reform? As the conversation regarding constitutional reform intensifies, especially as it regards issues such as citizenship of parliamentarians, removal of the Queen, and fixed election dates, what does constitutional reform mean?
What do I think about impeaching our politicians? It brings about accountability, and that goes back once more to having a structured political arena. Because now that we're holding politicians accountably, it means that they're forced to do their jobs. It means that we should see less corruption. I'm not saying that there isn't present. We should see better stewards. We should see better stewards, better political stewards. So the whole mismanagement of the country's money should come to an end, or not. Even if it doesn't come to an end, the rate at which the mismanagement is present should be lessened.
I think that is actually a very big topic, and I think I definitely agree with it. It really goes to show the public that no one is above the law. It really goes to show that everyone really ought to obey the law and everyone should listen.
I am for it 100%. I am for it 110% as a matter of fact. If it is that our elected representatives are not fulfilling the duties that they had promised to fulfill, I think an impeachment is the only way to go about it, because we are a country of integrity, transparency and accountability, and we need to try our best to ensure that our leaders are held accountable for their actions. If not, we take the necessary actions to just try to run our country in a better way in terms of the leadership.
Well, to me, constitutional reform actually means that the Constitution now accepts our pluralistic nature, in the sense that it now gives right to minority groups, as was just discussed. It ensures that everyone is subject to the same treatment by law, so no one can treat anyone inhumanely based off of the founding document of the country, the main legal source of the country. So it ensures that citizens of the country can now live comfortably within their country and not have to fear.
To me, constitutional reform really just means any changes or amendments that are made to the Constitution in an effort to make it more applicable to modern society.
Constitutional reform, for me, is something important because we have several issues that are in the Constitution that needs amendment and so on. And, you know, for laws especially, you need laws to be for everybody and not specializing for certain groups and certain people. So I think that constitutional reform is necessary.
Okay, I think constitutional reform is a very much necessary process because it is the driver of social and economic development within our country. We have come to realize that, especially our constitution, it is quite old and can be outdated in some instances. So it is now up to us to come together to be able to come up with tangible means of kind of adjusting it to how our society has evolved over time. So I think it is definitely something that we need to take into consideration and to start working towards together.
Well, being that we are the future for this country, I think a lot of our ideologies, a lot of our cultural traits should be taken into consideration. So as a result, youths with cultural traits that are, I believe, adverse or different from the regular should perhaps advocate so that their cultural traits are known and are understood.
Well, first of all, I definitely think that we have a part to play in giving our opinions in the topics and the matters that will be changed in the Constitution. I think we also have a role to play in the legal aspect of it, because at the end of the day, chances are we will be the ones that are most affected by it or live through it. So we definitely should have a forum to air our opinions on the matter.
Well, the role of the youth is to ensure that whatever we want, any amendments to the Constitution want, is youth friendly, of course, and that the youth is involved in whatever decision making that is, you know, to take place. Because we cannot be setting laws that by old politicians or persons in the government that will not live in the future for these laws. So you need laws that are sustainable, that have youth participation and involvement, and of course with the democratical nature.
Young people play a very crucial role, especially in constitutional reform, because we are the ones that will inherit this country after our forefathers and our politicians have left. And it is very important for us to speak up on a lot of these social issues to ensure that we fix them so that the world that we inherit, or the country that we inherit, is one that will allow us or maximize the potential that we have here in Jamaica. So young people, it is our role to speak up on these issues that we face and to speak up in the most effective manner that we can possibly find.
As our democracy evolves and grows, we must ensure that all voices are heard. Remember, you have a voice. Agitate your leaders, engage your leaders, and let them include you in the conversations regarding constitutional reform. Learn more about the Constitution, demand constitutional reform. It is your right. Youth for Chat. Talk up, youth.